When a billionaire father hired a struggling woman to pose as his date for one night, he never expected she'd be the one to save his broken family, or that loving her could destroy everything he'd fought to protect. Mason Reed had spent 3 years running from grief, raising his daughter alone while building walls around his heart. But the moment Ava Carter walked into his mansion, something shifted. She wasn't supposed to matter. She was just hired help, a temporary fix to avoid pitying stares at a charity gala. Yet within hours, his daughter was laughing again. And Mason, he was terrified. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mason Reed's penthouse office, like it was trying to break through, trying to reach him where he sat motionless behind his desk at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Outside, the city sprawled beneath him in a glittering mess of lights and ambition, but Mason barely saw it anymore. He'd stopped seeing most things 3 years ago. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. "What?" His voice came out flat when he finally answered. "Mr. Reed." His assistant, Patricia, sounded apologetic but firm, the tone she used when she knew he'd hate what she was about to say. "The Harrison Gala is Friday. You confirmed months ago. They're expecting you." Mason's jaw tightened. "Cancel it." "I can't. You're receiving the humanitarian award. Your absence would—" "Then go accept it for me." "Mason." Patricia dropped the formality, which meant she was serious. "You can't keep doing this. People are starting to talk. The board is concerned about—" "Let them talk." He ended the call and tossed the phone onto his desk, where it landed next to a framed photograph he should have put away years ago, but couldn't bring himself to touch. Sarah smiled up at him from the picture, her arms wrapped around a 3-year-old Emma, both of them laughing at something he could no longer remember. The photo had been taken 4 years ago at some company picnic, back when Mason still believed the universe gave a damn about fairness or happiness, or any of the lies people told themselves to sleep at night. The phone rang again. This time it was his home line, which meant Mrs. Chen, the nanny, and his stomach dropped before he even answered because calls this late were never good news. "Emma won't sleep," Mrs. Chen said, exhaustion bleeding through her usually patient voice. "She's asking for you again. I've tried everything, Mr. Reed, but she says she needs her daddy." Mason was already grabbing his jacket. "I'm coming home." The drive from downtown to his estate usually took 40 minutes, but Mason made it in 25, his Aston Martin cutting through rain-slicked streets while his mind raced faster than the engine. Emma had been having the nightmares again, the ones where everyone she loved disappeared, where she woke up screaming in an empty house, where death came back to steal whatever happiness she'd managed to find. The therapist said it was normal for a child who'd lost a parent. Normal. As if there was anything normal about a 6-year-old understanding mortality better than most adults. The mansion was lit up like a cathedral when he pulled through the gates, every window glowing against the storm. Mason had bought the place when Sarah was pregnant, back when they dreamed of filling it with children and laughter and all the beautiful chaos of a real family. Now it just felt like a museum dedicated to everything he'd lost. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, relief washing over her weathered face. "She's in her room. I gave her warm milk, read 3 stories, tried the music box. Nothing worked." "Go home, Mrs. Chen. I've got her." "Mr. Reed, it's midnight. I can stay?" "I said go home." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he immediately regretted it when hurt flickered across her expression. "Please, I'm sorry, just thank you for everything, but I need to do this." She nodded, gathered her things, and disappeared into the rain. Mason took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding with the particular terror that only parenthood could create, that unique fear of failing the one person who depended on you for everything. Emma's door was cracked open, light spilling into the hallway, and he could hear her crying before he saw her. She was curled up in the middle of her bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit Sarah had given her on her 4th birthday, tears streaming down her face. When she saw Mason, she launched herself at him. "Daddy!" He caught her, pulled her tight against his chest, felt her tiny body shaking with sobs. Hey, I'm here. I've got you, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "I had the dream again." Her voice was muffled against his shirt. "The one where you don't come back. Where I'm all alone and nobody comes and the house is empty and—" "Stop." Mason pulled back just enough to look at her face, to wipe away tears with his thumbs. That's never going to happen. You understand me? I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Emma's voice was so small, so devastatingly wise for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. Mommy promised too, but she left anyway. Something cracked inside Mason's chest, something that had barely held together for 3 years and was finally giving way under the weight of his daughter's grief mirroring his own. Your mom didn't want to leave, he said, his voice rough. She fought so hard to stay. But sometimes things happen that we can't control. Then how do I know you won't leave too? Mason had no answer, because she was right. He couldn't promise tomorrow, couldn't guarantee anything except this moment, right now with his daughter in his arms and rain pounding against windows, and the terrifying knowledge that love made you vulnerable to the kind of pain that never really healed. He held her until she fell asleep, then carried her back to bed and sat in the chair beside her, watching her breathe, making sure she was real and safe and still here. The clock on her nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. when his phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. You need a date for Friday. The optics matter. The board is already questioning your stability after you missed the last 3 events. Please, Mason, just this once. Let me help. He stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Fine. Whatever. Just handle it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I know someone. Professional. Discreet. She'll ask no questions and expect nothing beyond the agreed payment. Trust me. Mason didn't trust anyone anymore, but he was too tired to fight. Send me the details. He didn't expect the arrangement to matter. Didn't expect it to change anything. It was just one night, one public appearance to keep the board happy and the gossip columnists from speculating about his mental state. He'd smile for cameras, accept some meaningless award, and go back to his carefully controlled existence of work and Emma and nothing else that could hurt him. He had no idea he'd just agreed to let a stranger walk into his life who would tear down every wall he'd spent 3 years building. Mshwak. Friday arrived like an execution Mason couldn't postpone. He stood in his bedroom at 6 p.m. staring at the 3 different tuxedos his stylist had delivered, unable to care which one he wore. They all looked the same. Black fabric designed to make rich men look important while they congratulated each other for donating fractions of their wealth to causes they'd forget about by morning. Daddy, you look fancy! Emma appeared in his doorway, already in her pajamas even though it was barely evening. Mrs. Chen stood behind her, offering Mason an apologetic shrug. She insisted on saying goodbye before you left. Mason knelt down, adjusted the collar of Emma's favorite unicorn pajamas. I won't be late. Promise. Are you going on a date? Emma's eyes went wide with the kind of hope that made Mason's stomach turn. Is that why you're dressed up? No, sweetheart. Just a work thing. But Mrs. Chen said a lady is coming to pick you up. Mason shot a look at the nanny, who had the grace to look embarrassed. It's not like that, Em. She's just someone helping me with work tonight. Oh. The disappointment in that single syllable nearly broke him. Emma had been asking about him dating again for months now, had somehow gotten it into her head that if Mason found someone new, their family might feel whole again. She didn't understand that he'd rather cut off his own arm than risk that kind of loss again. The doorbell rang. Mason's heart did something complicated and unwelcome in his chest. That's probably her. Be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? Okay. Emma threw her arms around his neck. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, sweetheart. So much. He left her there and headed downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. This was a mistake. Everything about this felt wrong. He should have just skipped the gala, dealt with the board's complaints, lived with the consequences. Because letting someone new into his space, even temporarily, even for a fake date that meant nothing, Mason opened the door and forgot how to breathe. The woman standing on his doorstep wasn't what he'd expected. Patricia had said professional, which Mason had interpreted as polished and artificial, someone who made a living playing whatever role rich men needed. But this woman looked real. She wore a simple black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that showed off a face that didn't need makeup to be striking. But it was her eyes that caught him, dark brown and direct, meeting his gaze without the practiced charm or obvious calculation he'd anticipated. She looked nervous. Mr. Reed? Her voice was quiet but steady. I'm Ava Carter. Patricia sent me. Right. Yes. Come in. Mason stepped back, suddenly aware of how massive his entryway probably seemed to someone who didn't live surrounded by marble and crystal chandeliers. I just need to grab my jacket and we can… Is that her? Emma's voice rang out from the top of the stairs, and before Mason could stop her, his daughter was racing down, all rules about strangers forgotten in her excitement. Emma, wait! But Emma had already skidded to a stop in front of Ava, looking up at her with the kind of open curiosity that only children could pull off. Are you my daddy's date? Ava blinked, clearly caught off guard. She glanced at Mason, then back at Emma, and something softened in her expression. Instead of brushing the question off or offering some patronizing non-answer, she knelt down to Emma's level. I'm helping your dad with a work event tonight, Ava said gently, but I'm very happy to meet you. What's your name? Emma Marie Reed. I'm 6 3/4. Emma held up the appropriate number of fingers. What's your name? Ava Carter. I'm 30 0/4. The corner of Ava's mouth lifted in a small smile. I like your pajamas. Unicorns are excellent. They're my favorite. Emma's whole face lit up. Do you like unicorns? I do. Though I have to admit I'm more of a dragon person myself. Dragons are cool too. Do you want to see my room? I have a dragon poster that glows in the dark. Emma. Mason's voice came out firmer than he meant it to, and both Emma and Ava looked up at him with identical startled expressions. He softened his tone. Ava and I need to leave soon. Maybe another time. Oh. Emma's face fell. Okay. Ava stood and Mason saw something flicker in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe? But she smiled at Emma anyway. Your dad's right, but maybe I could see it another time? If that's okay with your dad? Emma spun toward Mason with pleading eyes. Can she? Please? Mason opened his mouth to say no, to shut this down before it became something, before Emma got attached to another person who would eventually disappear from her life. But then he saw the way Ava was looking at his daughter, not with the forced enthusiasm of someone trying to score points with a parent, but with genuine warmth. We'll see, he heard himself say, which was the closest thing to yes he could manage. Mrs. Chen appeared to collect Emma, who waved enthusiastically as she was led back upstairs. Bye, Ava. Have fun with my daddy. And then they were alone. Ava cleared her throat, some of her earlier nervousness returning. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep. Patricia mentioned you had a daughter, but said she wouldn't be… I should have kept things more professional. It's fine. Mason grabbed his jacket from the hall closet, needing something to do with his hands. She gets excited about new people. Doesn't happen often. She seems wonderful. She is. The words came out more defensive than Mason intended. Look, we should establish ground rules before we go. This is a business arrangement. We show up together, stay for 2 hours maximum, I accept the award, we leave. You don't need to pretend to be in love with me or anything dramatic, just stay close enough that it looks like we're together. That's all I need. Ava studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Okay. And don't mention my wife. If anyone asks about her, Patricia briefed me. Ava's voice was gentle, but firm. I know what to say and what not to say. I know this is difficult for you, Mr. Reed. I'm not here to make it worse. Something about the way she said it, without pity, without judgment, just simple understanding, made Mason's carefully constructed armor crack just slightly. It's Mason, he said. If we're pretending to date, you should probably use my first name. Mason, then, she smiled, small and tentative. Should we go? The drive to the hotel was quiet. Mason's driver navigated downtown traffic while Mason and Ava sat in the back seat, maintaining a careful distance. Mason stared out the window, trying not to think about the last time he'd attended one of these events with Sarah, how she'd made him laugh through the boring speeches, how she'd stolen champagne from other people's tables because she thought it tasted better than the stuff they were serving. Can I ask you something? Ava's voice pulled him back to the present. Depends on the question. Why did you agree to this? The award, I mean. Patricia mentioned you've been avoiding public events. Mason kept his gaze on the window. Because apparently my grief is bad for business. The board thinks I'm becoming a liability. This is me proving I'm still functional. Are you? Functional, I mean? He turned to look at her then, surprised by the directness. Most people tiptoed around him, treating his loss like some contagious disease they might catch if they acknowledged it too openly. But Ava was watching him with those dark, steady eyes, and there was no pity in them, just curiosity. Most days, he admitted, some days are harder than others. Yeah. Something passed across Ava's face. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. I get that. Before Mason could ask what she meant, they pulled up to the hotel. Flashes immediately erupted from the gaggle of photographers stationed at the entrance, and Mason felt his entire body tense. Ready? Ava asked quietly. No, but let's go anyway. He helped her out of the car, and the moment his hand touched hers, camera flashes intensified. Ava didn't flinch, didn't freeze up or play to the cameras. She just walked beside him, her hand light in his, like this was the most normal thing in the world. They made it through the lobby and into the ballroom, where the city's elite had already gathered in their designer gowns and expensive tuxedos, champagne glasses glittering under crystal chandeliers. Mason immediately spotted at least a dozen people he'd been avoiding for months. "Mason Reed!" A voice boomed from his left, and Mason turned to find Richard Harrison, the event's host, bearing down on them with the kind of aggressive friendliness rich men used to show dominance. "We were worried you wouldn't show, and who is this lovely creature you've brought?" Mason felt Ava tense slightly beside him. He pulled her closer, his hand settling on the small of her back. "Richard, this is Ava Carter. Ava, Richard Harrison." Charmed, absolutely charmed. Richard took Ava's hand and kissed it in a gesture that made Mason want to punch him. "How did a beautiful woman like you end up with this workaholic?" "I have excellent taste," Ava said smoothly, and something about the dry humor in her voice made Mason's lips twitch, despite himself. They survived Richard, then survived another 20 minutes of similar interactions. Fake smiles, probing questions, thinly veiled gossip disguised as concern. Through it all, Ava played her part perfectly. She didn't pretend to be madly in love with him, didn't overdo the affection. She just stayed. Close enough to seem connected, natural enough that nobody questioned it. Mason found himself watching her more than he should, noticing small things. The way she listened when people talked, really listened, instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. The way she deflected invasive questions about their relationship with humor instead of defensiveness. The way she didn't seem impressed or intimidated by the wealth surrounding them. "You're staring," Ava murmured during a lull in conversation. "Sorry, you're good at this." "At pretending?" "At making it look real." She glanced up at him, and for a moment something flickered between them. Awareness, maybe. Recognition of something neither of them wanted to name. "Come on," Mason said abruptly, needing to move, needing to break whatever that moment was. "Let's get some air before dinner starts." He led her toward the terrace, pushing through French doors into cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. They stood at the railing, the party noise muffled behind them. "You don't like these things," Ava observed. It wasn't a question. "No, I don't." "Why do them then?" Mason considered brushing off the question with something vague about business obligations, but something about the quiet between them, the distance from the crowded ballroom, made him want to be honest. "Because if I don't, people worry. And when people worry about my stability, they start questioning whether I should be running my company, whether I'm fit to make decisions, whether grief has made me incompetent." He gripped the railing harder. "So I show up, I smile, I prove I'm still functional, and then I go home to my daughter and try to convince both of us that we're okay." "Are you? Okay?" "No?" The admission came easier than it should have. "But I'm trying to be. For Emma's." Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I lost my mom 2 years ago, cancer. I spent 3 years watching her fade, and then she was just gone. And everyone kept telling me it would get easier, that time would heal, all those useless platitudes people say because they don't know what else to offer." She turned to face him. "But the truth is, some things don't get easier. You just get better at carrying them." Mason looked at her, really looked at her, and saw his own grief reflected back, not the crushing, desperate kind that made people uncomfortable, but the quiet, permanent kind that changed you from the inside out. "I'm sorry," he said, "about your mom. I'm sorry about your wife." They stood there, two people bound by loss, and something shifted. The pretense fell away. This wasn't a business arrangement anymore. Wasn't two strangers playing roles for a room full of shallow socialites. This was real. Mr. Reed? A hotel staff member appeared at the terrace door. They're ready to start dinner. You're seated at table 1. The spell broke. Mason stepped back, that careful distance returning. Right. Thank you. Dinner was the usual parade of overpriced food served in portions too small to matter, punctuated by speeches from people who loved hearing themselves talk. Mason barely tasted anything, too aware of Ava sitting beside him, too conscious of every small movement, every shared glance when someone said something particularly ridiculous. She fit into his space too easily. That was the problem. She didn't feel like a stranger he'd hired for the night. She felt like someone who belonged there, and that terrified him. Finally, mercifully, they reached the awards portion of the evening. Mason half listened to Richard's introduction, something about philanthropy and leadership and community impact, all the buzzwords rich people use to feel better about themselves. And now, I'd like to present this year's Humanitarian Achievement Award to Mason Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises. Applause erupted. Mason stood, buttoning his jacket, and made his way to the stage. He accepted the crystal trophy, shook Richard's hand, and stepped up to the microphone. He'd prepared a speech, something brief and gracious and meaningless. But standing there, looking out at the crowd, seeing Ava watching him with those steady, understanding eyes, the prepared words evaporated. Thank you, he started, his voice echoing through the ballroom. Though I'm not sure I deserve this. The truth is, I haven't done much worth celebrating lately. For the past 3 years, I've mostly just been trying to survive, trying to be there for my daughter, trying to figure out how to keep moving forward when the person who gave your life meaning is gone. The room had gone silent. Mason could see Richard shifting uncomfortably at the edge of the stage. But I've learned something recently, about grief, about loss, about the risk of letting people in. His eyes found Ava's again. I've learned that closing yourself off doesn't protect you from pain. It just guarantees loneliness. And that maybe, the bravest thing we can do after loss isn't to build walls. It's to stay open, to risk caring again, even when we know how badly it can hurt. He held up the trophy, the crystal catching the light. So thank you for this. But the real achievement isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who chooses to keep loving, keep trying, keep showing up, even after life has broken their heart. He left the stage to stunned silence, then scattered applause that grew stronger as he made his way back to the table. Ava was staring at him, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears. That wasn't what you planned to say, was it? She asked quietly. No, it wasn't. It was perfect. The rest of the evening blurred. More people congratulated him, asked questions, tried to parse what his speech had meant. But Mason barely registered them. He was too focused on getting through this, on making it home, on figuring out what the hell he'd just admitted in front of 500 people. Finally, blessedly, they escaped. The drive home was quieter than the drive there, but it was a different kind of quiet. Comfortable, almost. Like they'd crossed some invisible line and couldn't quite figure out how to navigate the new territory. When they pulled up to Mason's estate, he turned to Ava. Thank you, for tonight. You made it bearable. That's a ringing endorsement. But she smiled when she said it. I mean it. You didn't have to be kind. This was just a job. But you were real. And I needed that. Ava's smile faded into something more serious. Mason, can I tell you something? Off the record, not part of whatever arrangement Patricia set up? Sure. You're not broken just because you're grieving, and your daughter doesn't need you to be perfect. She just needs you to be honest, to keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. She reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. You're doing better than you think. Before Mason could respond, before he could process the strange warmth spreading through his chest at her words, the front door burst open and Emma came running out, Mrs. Chen chasing after her. You're back! Did you have fun? Did Ava have fun? Can she come inside? Please, please, please. Mason looked at Ava, who was smiling at Emma with that same genuine warmth from earlier. He should send her away. Should thank her for her time, pay her whatever ridiculous amount Patricia had promised, and close this door before it led somewhere dangerous. But then Ava looked at him, a question in her eyes, and Mason heard himself say, Would you like to come in for a bit? I'd love to. And just like that, Mason Reed, the man who'd spent 3 years avoiding emotional connections, who'd convinced himself love was too dangerous to risk again, let a stranger walk into his home. He had no idea she was about to change everything. Emma dragged Ava up the stairs before Mason could reconsider the invitation, chattering nonstop about dragons and unicorns and some complicated playground drama involving a boy named Tyler who apparently didn't believe girls could be superheroes. Mrs. Chen gave Mason a look he couldn't quite decipher, somewhere between approval and concern, before quietly slipping out the front door. And then Mason was alone in his foyer, still in his tuxedo, wondering what the hell he'd just done. He found them in Emma's room, Ava kneeling beside the bed, while Emma pointed out every single glow-in-the-dark star on her ceiling, explaining the constellations she'd made up herself because the real ones were boring. "That's the ice cream dipper," Emma said seriously, pointing to a cluster of stars that looked nothing like any actual constellation. "And that one is the flying pizza. And that's the unicorn dragon, which is the most powerful one because it's both things at once." "That makes perfect sense," Ava said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Why should you have to choose between unicorns and dragons when you can have both?" "Exactly," Emma beamed. "Daddy says I have too much imagination, but I think he doesn't have enough." "I heard that," Mason said from the doorway. Emma spun around, guilty but unrepentant. "It's true, though. You never want to play pretend anymore." The accusation hit harder than it should have. Mason knew he'd pulled back from a lot of things after Sarah died. Not just social events and business dinners, but the small joys, too. Reading bedtime stories with funny voices, building blanket forts, believing in magic, even the pretend kind. "Your dad probably has a lot on his mind," Ava said gently, saving him from having to respond. "Running a company is hard work." "I guess." Emma didn't sound convinced. "But Mommy always said work is important, but people are more important. And playing is how you remember to be a person and not just a work robot." Mason's throat tightened. Sarah had said that, almost word for word, usually when she was trying to drag him away from his laptop on weekends. "Your mom was right," he managed. "She usually was." "I miss her." Emma's voice went small and sad, the way it always did when she talked about Sarah. "Do you think she can see us? From heaven? Or wherever?" Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. He'd never known how to answer that question. He didn't believe in heaven, didn't believe in anything except the cold finality of loss. But he couldn't tell his 6-year-old daughter that death was just darkness and absence and never getting back what you'd lost. "I think," Ava said quietly, "that love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. I think it stays. In memories, in the things they taught us, in the way they changed who we are. So maybe she can't see you the way she used to, but she's still part of you, still here, in a different way." Emma considered this seriously. "Like how you can't see air, but it's still real." "Exactly like that." "Okay." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer in a way she never was when Mason tried to explain it. "Do you want to see my art? I'm really good at painting." "I'd love to." 20 minutes later, Mason found himself sitting on Emma's floor while his daughter showed Ava every painting she'd done in the last 6 months. Abstract swirls of color that might have been anything, careful attempts at flowers and houses, and one particularly disturbing piece that Emma proudly announced was "the monster that lives in my closet, but we're friends now, so it's okay." Ava studied each one like it was hanging in a museum, asking questions, pointing out details Mason had never noticed. And Emma glowed under the attention, talking more animatedly than she had in months. "This one is my favorite," Emma said, pulling out a painting that made Mason's chest ache. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, one small. Above them, a yellow circle that could have been the sun, or maybe a face. "That's me and Daddy and Mommy. We're at the beach. Mommy loved the beach." "It's beautiful," Ava said softly. "You can really feel how happy you all were." "We were." Emma traced her finger over the figures. "But now it's just me and Daddy. The picture doesn't work anymore because there's a person missing." Mason's hands clenched. He should have put that painting away, should have hidden it with all the other reminders of what they'd lost. But Emma had wanted to keep it, and he hadn't been able to say no. "Emma, it's getting late," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You should get ready for bed." "But Ava just got here." "It's okay," Ava said, standing. "Your dad's right. It's late, and I should probably go anyway." No! Emma's eyes went wide with panic, and Mason recognized the look, the same one she got when she was afraid something good was about to be taken away. You can't go yet. You just got here. You didn't even see my rock collection or my books or… Emma. Mason used his dad voice, the one that meant the discussion was over. Ava has been very nice to spend this much time with you, but she has her own life to get back to. We can't keep her here all night. Emma's face crumpled. For a horrible moment, Mason thought she might cry. Instead, she turned to Ava with devastating politeness. Will you come back? Please? You could come for dinner, or we could go to the park, or you could help me with my art project for school. Sweetheart, that's not… Mason started. I'd like that, Ava interrupted, and Mason's head snapped toward her. If it's okay with your dad, maybe I could come by sometime next week? Emma's entire face lit up. Really? You promise? I promise. Ava, you don't have to… Mason began, but Ava was already looking at him, and there was something in her expression that stopped his protest. I want to, she said simply. If that's all right with you. Mason knew he should say no. Should thank her for her time tonight, pay her, and close this door before Emma got more attached. Before he got more attached. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, at the first real happiness he'd seen there in weeks, he couldn't do it. One visit, he heard himself say. Next week. We'll see how it goes. Yes! Emma threw her arms around Mason's waist. Thank you, Daddy. This is the best night ever. Mason met Ava's eyes over Emma's head, saw understanding there mixed with something else he couldn't name. She mouthed, sorry, and he shook his head slightly. This wasn't her fault. If anything, it was his for letting her in the door in the first place. Getting Emma to bed took another 20 minutes of negotiations, 3 glasses of water, and a promise that yes, Ava would really truly come back next week. Finally, blessedly, Emma's eyes started drooping during the second bedtime story, and Mason was able to slip out of her room. He found Ava downstairs in the living room, standing in front of the fireplace, studying the photos on the mantel. Most of them were of Emma at various ages, but there were a few of Sarah too, ones Mason hadn't been able to put away even though looking at them hurt. She was beautiful, Ava said without turning around. Your wife. Yes, she was. Mason loosened his bow tie, suddenly exhausted. You really don't have to come back next week. I can explain to Emma that something came up, that you're busy. Do you not want me to come back? The question was direct, and it deserved an honest answer. I don't know what I want. This whole thing got complicated faster than I expected. Because of Emma or because of you? Mason poured himself a scotch from the bar cart, not bothering to ask if Ava wanted one. Both. Emma doesn't need to get attached to someone who's going to disappear from her life. She's had enough loss. And you? Ava turned to face him. Are you worried about her getting attached or about you getting attached? That's not… Mason stopped, took a drink. This was supposed to be one night, a business arrangement. You help me get through a gala, I pay you. We never see each other again. Plans change. Not mine. I don't do change anymore. Change means risk, and risk means loss. I know. Ava moved closer, and Mason noticed for the first time how tired she looked, how the careful composure from earlier had started to crack. But isolation isn't protection, Mason. It's just another kind of loss. A slower one. You sound like my therapist. Is your therapist wrong? Mason didn't answer. He couldn't because they both knew the truth. What do you do? He asked instead, changing the subject. For work, I mean. Patricia didn't tell me much. Ava's expression shifted, became more guarded. Right now? Whatever pays. I do temp work mostly. Administrative stuff, event planning, some tutoring, nothing glamorous. That's not what I asked. That's what I do. What did you want to do? Before? She was quiet for a long moment, and Mason thought she might not answer. Then, I wanted to teach art. I was 2 semesters away from my degree when my mom got sick. Had to drop out to take care of her, and by the time she died, I'd burned through my savings on medical bills and funeral costs. Now I'm just surviving, trying to get back on my feet. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choice. She needed me, and I was there. That's what matters. But there was grief in her voice, the kind that came from sacrificing dreams you'd never get back. Mason understood that too well. How much did Patricia promise you? He asked. For tonight? Ava named a figure that made him wince. It wasn't nothing, but it was far less than the evening had been worth, especially now that Emma had complicated everything. That's not enough. He set down his glass, pulled out his phone. I'm going to transfer you triple that amount. For your time tonight, and for putting up with my daughter's enthusiasm. Mason, you don't have to. I want to. He met her eyes. And I want you to come back next week, if you want to. Not because I'm paying you, but because Emma would love it. And because I think maybe I would too. The words hung between them, more honest than Mason had intended. Ava's expression softened. Okay, she said quietly. I'll come back. Tuesday? After Emma gets home from school? Tuesday works. They stood there in the quiet of his too-big house, two people bound by loss and loneliness and the tentative hope that maybe, possibly, there was still something worth reaching for on the other side of grief. I should go, Ava said finally. It's late. Mason walked her to the door, called his driver to take her home. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she turned back. Thank you, she said, for tonight, for letting me meet Emma, for being honest instead of hiding behind walls. I'm still hiding behind walls. I know, but you opened the door a crack. That's something. She left, and Mason stood in his doorway, watching the car disappear down his long driveway, wondering what the hell he'd just started and whether he'd regret it. Probably. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than numb. And that terrified him more than anything. The days between Friday and Tuesday felt longer than they should have. Mason threw himself into work the way he always did when his thoughts got too loud, burying himself in contracts and acquisitions and board meetings that stretched past midnight. But Emma wouldn't let him forget. Is it Tuesday yet? She asked on Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, Monday night. Almost, sweetheart. Do you think Ava really likes me? Or was she just being nice because you were paying her? The question hit him in the chest. I think she really likes you. How do you know? Because nobody's that good an actor. Emma seemed satisfied with this, but Mason couldn't shake the question. Ava had been genuine with his daughter. He'd stake his life on that. But genuine didn't mean permanent. People left. That was the only constant he trusted anymore. Tuesday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of late autumn day that felt borrowed from summer. Mason left work early, something he never did, and found himself pacing the living room at 3:30, 15 minutes before Ava was supposed to arrive. You're nervous, Mrs. Chen observed, amusement in her voice. I'm not nervous, I'm just nervous, she smiled. It's okay, Mr. Reed. It's nice to see you care about something again. Before Mason could respond, Emma came barreling through the front door, dropped her backpack in the hallway, and announced, Is Ava here yet? Not yet. You have homework. I'll do it later. I need to get ready. What if she doesn't recognize me? Em, you met her 4 days ago. She'll recognize you. But Emma was already racing upstairs to change out of her school uniform, leaving Mason and Mrs. Chen staring after her. That child has more energy than physics allows, Mrs. Chen said. I'll make tea. Something tells me you'll need it. Ava arrived at exactly 4 o'clock, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, carrying a bag that Mason suspected held art supplies. She looked nervous, too, which was oddly reassuring. Hi, she said when he opened the door. I wasn't sure what 6-year-olds like, so I brought some drawing stuff and also some cookies from this bakery near my apartment, which is probably terrible parenting, but Ava! Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, now wearing her favorite purple dress and approximately 17 hair clips. You came! Of course I came, I promised, didn't I? Emma flew down the stairs and grabbed Ava's hand. Come see my art room. Daddy built it for me last year, and it has this huge table and every kind of paint, and I've been working on a new project, and I want to show you— Emma, let Ava breathe, Mason said, but he was smiling despite himself. It's fine. Ava let herself be dragged toward the sunroom that Mason had converted into an art space, complete with easels and a wall of supplies that would make most elementary schools jealous. I want to see everything. Mason followed at a distance, leaning against the doorframe while Emma showed Ava her latest masterpiece, a painting of what might have been a garden, or possibly an alien landscape. Ava asked questions, made suggestions, treated Emma's work with the kind of respect most adults didn't bother giving children. "You have a really good sense of color," Ava said, studying the painting. "See how you use the purple next to the yellow? That's called complementary colors. They make each other look brighter." "Really?" Emma peered at her work with new interest. "I just thought it looked cool." "That's how all the best art starts. You follow what feels right, and then later you learn why it works." They painted together for an hour, and Mason watched from his position in the doorway, answering emails on his phone but not really absorbing anything. He was too distracted by the sound of Emma's laughter, by the easy way Ava moved through his daughter's space, by the unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. This was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous, but he couldn't seem to make himself care. "Daddy, come paint with us," Emma called. "I have work." "Please?" "Ava says anyone can paint, even people who think they can't." Ava looked up, paint smudged on her cheek, and shrugged. "She's not wrong. Come on, billionaire. Show us what you've got." Mason found himself setting down his phone and picking up a brush before his brain could catch up with his body. Emma cheered. Ava grinned, and for the next 20 minutes, Mason Reed, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, ruthless negotiator, man who hadn't relaxed in 3 years, painted terrible abstract shapes while his daughter giggled and Ava offered gentle corrections that didn't make him feel incompetent. "It's not bad," Ava said, studying his canvas with mock seriousness. "Very emotional. Lots of dark colors. Someone should probably talk to a therapist about all that blue." "I have a therapist." "Is it working?" "Not as well as this, apparently." The words slipped out before he could stop them, honest and unguarded. Ava's expression softened, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. Mrs. Chen announced dinner at 6, and Emma immediately insisted Ava stay. "Oh, I don't want to impose," Ava started. "Please?" Emma grabbed her hand. "We're having spaghetti, and it's really good. And you can sit next to me and we can talk about art school because Daddy said you wanted to be a teacher, and I want to know everything about that." Ava looked at Mason, a question in her eyes. He should say no. Should maintain boundaries. Should protect both Emma and himself from getting too attached. "We have plenty of food," he heard himself say instead. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma talked nonstop, peppering Ava with questions about art and college and what it was like to be 30, which is basically ancient, but you don't look ancient, so that's good. Ava answered everything with patience and humor, occasionally catching Mason's eye across the table with expressions that ranged from amused to overwhelmed. "Why did you stop going to college?" Emma asked at one point, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Emma, that's personal," Mason started. "It's okay." Ava set down her water glass. "I stopped because my mom got sick and needed someone to take care of her. So I moved home and became that person." "Like how Daddy took care of me when Mommy died?" "Sort of like that, yeah." Emma considered this. "Was it hard? Taking care of someone who's sick?" "Very hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done." "Do you miss her? Your mom?" "Every single day." "Me too. I miss my mom every day too." Emma's voice went quiet. "Does it ever stop hurting?" Ava reached out and squeezed Emma's hand. "It stops hurting quite as much. The missing doesn't go away, but it gets softer, and you start remembering the good parts more than the sad parts." "When?" "I don't know. It's different for everyone." Mason's throat had closed up. He stared at his plate, unable to speak, unable to do anything except listen to his daughter, and this woman who understood grief in a way most people didn't. "Okay," Emma said finally, and went back to eating spaghetti like they'd been discussing the weather. After dinner, Emma wanted to watch a movie, and somehow that turned into all three of them on the couch, with Emma wedged between Mason and Ava, her head on Ava's shoulder, her feet in Mason's lap. The movie was some animated thing about talking animals that Mason couldn't follow because he was too aware of Ava's presence, too conscious of how right this felt and how wrong it was to let himself feel that. Emma fell asleep halfway through, her mouth slightly open, one hand still clutching a piece of the cookie Ava had brought. Mason carefully extracted himself from the couch and picked her up, carrying her to her room while Ava paused the movie. When he came back downstairs, Ava was cleaning up the living room, gathering Emma's scattered toys. "You don't have to do that," Mason said. "I know, But I want to help. She set a stuffed elephant on the shelf. She's amazing, Mason, your daughter. You're raising an incredible kid. I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing. You're not. Ava turned to face him. She's happy. She feels safe. She knows she's loved. That's not failing. She's also desperate for a mother figure, which is why she latched onto you so fast. I need you to understand that. This isn't about you specifically. She's looking for something I can't give her. I know. Ava's voice was gentle. But would it be so terrible if I kept coming around? As a friend, not a replacement. Someone she can talk to, paint with, ask questions she might not want to ask you. And what happens when you leave? When this runs its course and Emma has to deal with another loss? What makes you think I'm going to leave? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to examine. Everyone leaves, Mason said finally. One way or another, people die, people change, people decide you're not worth the effort anymore. That's just how it works. That's how it worked for you. Once, it doesn't have to be a pattern, doesn't it? Mason moved to the window, stared out at his manicured lawn, his perfect life that felt hollow most days. My wife left. Not by choice, but she still left. And I've watched Emma realize that love doesn't protect you from loss, that caring about someone just gives them the power to destroy you. Is that really what you want to teach her? That it's better not to love anyone than to risk getting hurt? I want to protect her. From what? From living? From connecting with people? From being human? Ava's voice rose slightly, passion bleeding through. I'm sorry about your wife, Mason. I really am. But you can't let one tragedy turn you into someone who's afraid of everything. I'm not afraid. Oksel. Yes, you are. You're terrified. Of me. Of whatever this is becoming. Of letting your daughter have relationships outside of you because what if those people leave too? But here's the thing. They might. I might. And it would hurt. But the alternative is this half-life where you're so busy protecting yourself from pain that you miss everything good. Mason turned to face her, anger and fear and something dangerously close to hope warring in his chest. What do you want from me, Ava? I want you to stop pushing away everyone who tries to care about you. I want you to let Emma have this, whatever this is. And I want you to admit that maybe, possibly, you're not as okay with being alone as you pretend to be. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She stepped closer. I spent 3 years watching my mother die. 3 years where every day was harder than the last, where I gave up everything I wanted because she needed me. And when she finally died, you know what I felt? Relief. Because it was over. Because I could stop watching someone I loved suffer. Her voice cracked. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. And then I felt angry that she was gone. And then I felt nothing at all for months because feeling anything hurt too much. Mason stared at her, saw his own pain reflected back. So yeah, Ava continued, I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to be so scared of getting hurt again that you wall yourself off from everything. But I also know that's not living. That's just existing. And your daughter deserves more than a father who's just going through the motions. The words hit like a physical blow because they were true. Mason had been going through the motions for 3 years, convincing himself that survival was enough, that keeping Emma safe and fed and educated was all that mattered. But it wasn't enough. He could see that now, standing in his living room with this woman who'd walked into his life 5 days ago and somehow seen through every defense he'd built. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. How to let people in. How to risk caring again. Neither do I. Ava smiled, sad and understanding. But maybe we could figure it out together. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just showing up. Mason wanted to say yes, wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to believe that maybe she was right. Maybe life could still hold something good after loss. But fear held him frozen. I should go, Ava said finally, when the silence stretched too long. It's getting late. Ava, it's okay. She grabbed her bag, headed for the door. Think about what I said, and let me know if you want me to keep visiting Emma. I meant what I said. I'm happy to be here, but only if you're okay with it. She was almost out the door when Mason heard himself say, Tuesday and Thursday. She stopped, turned back. What? Come back Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. If you want, Emma would love it. And He forced himself to meet her eyes. I think I would too. Ava's smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Okay, Tuesday and Thursday. She left, and Mason stood in his empty foyer, his heart pounding, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to and why it felt like jumping off a cliff. But for the first time in 3 years, falling didn't seem quite so terrifying. The pattern established itself faster than Mason expected. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became sacred time in Emma's world, marked on the kitchen calendar with hand-drawn stars and countdown notes that said things like, 3 more days until Ava, in purple crayon. Mason told himself he was doing this for his daughter, that Ava's presence had nothing to do with the way his chest felt lighter on those afternoons, or how he found himself leaving work early on Tuesdays and Thursdays when he never left early for anything else. The first few weeks followed a predictable rhythm. Ava would arrive at 4, Emma would monopolize her completely until dinner, and Mason would work from his home office while pretending he wasn't listening to their laughter floating through the house. Sometimes Ava stayed for dinner. Sometimes she left right at 6. Mason never asked her to stay, and she never assumed she should, and the careful dance of boundaries felt safe even as it became increasingly frustrating. It was the third Thursday, nearly a month after the gala, when things started shifting in ways Mason couldn't ignore. He'd been on a conference call that ran long, some crisis with a supplier in Taiwan that required his immediate attention. By the time he finished, it was past 7 and the house had gone quiet. He found Emma and Ava in the art room, both of them covered in paint, working on what appeared to be a mural-sized canvas spread across the floor. "Daddy, look!" Emma didn't even glance up from her painting. "We're making a garden. Ava says big art is just as easy as small art. You just need more space and more paint." "And significantly more mess," Ava added, surveying the paint splatters covering her jeans. "Sorry about the floor. We put down a tarp, but Emma has impressive aim. It's fine." Mason stepped carefully around the canvas, taking in the explosion of colors that somehow resolved into flowers and trees and what might have been a pond. This is ambitious. Emma wanted to paint something for her room, something that would make her feel happy when she woke up. "I wanted unicorns too," Emma said, adding what appeared to be a purple horse with a spiral horn. "But Ava said we should start with flowers and add unicorns later if there's room." Very diplomatic. Mason caught Ava's eye, saw amusement there mixed with something warmer. "I'm learning to negotiate with 6-year-olds. It's harder than it looks." Emma worked for another 10 minutes before declaring herself done for the night. "My arms are tired and I'm hungry. Can we order pizza? Please, please, please?" Mason was about to suggest something healthier when Ava said, "Pizza sounds perfect, but only if you help me clean up this disaster first." To Mason's surprise, Emma didn't argue. She helped gather brushes and caps for paint bottles, chattering the whole time about her day at school, about the spelling test she'd aced, about how Tyler finally admitted that girls could be superheroes after she beat him in a race at recess. "I told him Wonder Woman could totally beat up Superman," Emma said proudly. "And he said that's not fair because Wonder Woman has magic, but I said Superman has powers too, so it's exactly fair." "Solid logic," Ava said, wrapping the wet canvas carefully. "What did Tyler say to that?" "He said I was right, but he was still mad about losing the race." Emma grinned. "Boys are weird." "They really are," Ava agreed, and her eyes flicked to Mason with unmistakable mischief. "I'm standing right here," he said. "We know," Emma giggled. "You're weird too, Daddy, but it's okay because we love you anyway." The casual way she said it, like love was simple, uncomplicated, just a fact of existence, made Mason's throat tight. Emma had always been generous with affection, throwing "I love you" around like confetti. But hearing it now, in this context, with Ava present and his defenses already weakened, hit differently. They ordered pizza. Emma insisted on pineapple despite Mason's objections, and Ava sided with her, which led to a good-natured debate about pizza toppings that somehow revealed more about all of them than Mason intended. "Pineapple is fruit," Mason argued. "Fruit doesn't belong on pizza." "Tomatoes are fruit," Ava countered, "and tomato sauce is literally the foundation of pizza." "That's different." "How?" "It just is." "Compelling argument, counselor." Emma watched them go back and forth with obvious delight, her head swiveling like she was watching tennis. When the pizza arrived, she announced, "I like that you and Ava argue, but you're not really mad. Mommy, and you used to do that too." The observation hung in the air. Mason froze, unsure how to respond. Ava looked equally uncertain. "Your mom and I did argue sometimes," Mason said carefully. "But you're right. We weren't really mad. It was just how we talked about things." "I miss hearing it." Emma took a bite of pizza, seemingly unaware of the emotional grenade she'd just lobbed. "The house is too quiet now, like everyone's afraid to be loud." Mason had no response to that. He'd spent 3 years trying to maintain calm, to create stability, to make sure Emma felt safe in a world that had proven itself catastrophically unsafe. The idea that his careful control had created its own kind of damage hadn't occurred to him. "Well," Ava said after a moment, "if you want loud, we could teach your dad the song we made up yesterday. The one about the dragon who was afraid of heights." "Yes!" Emma perked up immediately. "It's really silly, Daddy. You're going to love it." Mason doubted that, but he let them perform their ridiculous song anyway, complete with hand motions and sound effects. And despite himself, despite every instinct telling him to maintain distance, he found himself laughing. Really laughing. Not the polite chuckle he gave at board meetings, but the kind of laughter that came from somewhere genuine. Emma beamed at him like he'd given her the moon. After dinner, Emma wanted to play a board game, which turned into 2 board games, which meant it was past 9 by the time she finally admitted she was tired. Ava started gathering her things. "I should go. This is way later than I meant to stay." "You don't have to rush off," Mason said, then immediately regretted it because what was he doing, asking her to stay longer when he should be reinforcing boundaries? "I kind of do. I have an early shift tomorrow." Ava pulled on her jacket, which was splattered with paint from the earlier art project. "Temp agency got me a receptionist gig downtown. 7 a.m. start time." "That's brutal. That's life." She smiled, but there was tiredness behind it. "Rent doesn't pay itself." Mason thought about the transfer he'd made weeks ago, the amount that should have covered her expenses for months. The money I sent? Did you get it?" "I did, and it's been incredibly helpful, but it's also not a permanent solution." She shouldered her bag. "I need to find something stable, something that doesn't require me to wonder each week if I'll have enough hours." "What about teaching? You said you wanted to finish your degree." "I did. I do. But degrees cost money I don't have. And even if I could scrape together tuition, I'd need to quit working full-time, which means no rent money, which means—" She trailed off, shrugged. "It's a nice dream, just not a realistic one right now." Something uncomfortable twisted in Mason's gut. Here he was, living in a mansion worth millions, while this woman who'd brought more light into his house in 4 weeks than he'd felt in 3 years was struggling to make rent. What if I helped? The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. "With tuition, with expenses. Whatever you need to finish your degree." Ava's expression shuddered immediately. "No. Why not? I have the money. It wouldn't even make a dent in my—" "Because I'm not your charity project, Mason." Her voice went cool in a way he'd never heard before. "I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not looking for a wealthy benefactor to solve my problems." "That's not what I meant. Isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "Rich guy meets struggling woman, decides to fix her life with his money. That's a pretty common story, and it never ends well for the woman. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to help someone who's been incredibly kind to my daughter. By making me dependent on you? By putting me in a position where I owe you?" Ava shook her head. "I've worked too hard to maintain my independence to give it up now, even for good reasons." Mason felt frustration rising. "That's pride talking. There's nothing wrong with accepting help." "There is when the help comes with strings attached." "What strings? I'm not asking for anything. Aren't you?" Ava's eyes flashed. "Because it feels like maybe you are. Like maybe part of you thinks that if you pay for my education, I'll keep coming around. Keep being whatever this is for Emma. And maybe for you too." The accusation hit too close to home. Mason opened his mouth to deny it, but the words stuck. "That's what I thought." Ava moved toward the door. "Look, I appreciate the offer, really, but I need to do this myself, on my own terms. That's important to me. Even if it takes years? Even if you're miserable in the meantime? Even then. Because at least it'll be mine. She left before Mason could figure out how to respond, and he stood in his foyer feeling like he'd somehow failed a test he hadn't known he was taking. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Why did Ava leave mad? She's not mad, sweetheart, just tired. You're lying. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. I heard you arguing, not the fun kind, the real kind. Mason climbed the stairs, guided Emma back to her room. Adults disagree sometimes. It doesn't mean anything bad. Are you going to make her stop coming because you're mad at each other? No, Em, I promise. Ava will still come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Promise for real? Not the kind of promise that might break? The question destroyed him. Because Emma had learned too young that promises could shatter, that nothing was guaranteed, that people left even when they swore they wouldn't. I promise for real, he said, hoping desperately that he could keep it. The next Tuesday, Ava showed up exactly at 4, professional and friendly and maintaining a careful distance that made Mason's chest ache. She focused entirely on Emma, barely spoke to Mason beyond basic pleasantries, and left at 6:15 without staying for dinner despite Emma's pleading. Thursday followed the same pattern. By the following Tuesday, Emma was picking up on the tension. Did you make Ava sad? She asked Mason over breakfast. Why would you think that? Because she doesn't smile as much anymore. Not when you're around. Emma studied him with unsettling perception. You should say sorry. I didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Then why is she different? Mason had no good answer for that. That afternoon, he waited until Emma was absorbed in a painting project before catching Ava in the kitchen where she was washing brushes. We need to talk, he said. I'm here for Emma, not for conversations. Ava, please. I didn't mean to insult you. The offer came from a good place. I know. She set down a brush, finally looked at him. That's what makes it complicated. Because you're not being manipulative or controlling. You genuinely wanted to help. But Mason, I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding myself from scratch, learning to stand on my own, to not need anyone else to survive. And accepting money from you, especially that much money, feels like giving up ground I fought hard to claim. I get that. I do. But there's a difference between independence and refusing help just to prove a point. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, they look pretty similar. She leaned against the counter, exhaustion showing in the lines around her eyes. You lost your wife. You know what it's like when people treat you differently because they feel sorry for you. When they offer help that's really just pity dressed up nice. I get that all the time now. Poor Ava, who gave up everything for her sick mother. Poor Ava, who couldn't finish college. It's suffocating. That's not what this is, isn't it? At least a little bit? Mason wanted to deny it, but honesty stopped him. Because maybe she was right. Maybe part of him did see her as someone who needed saving, and maybe that wasn't fair. I think you're remarkable, he said finally. The way you survived something impossible and came out still capable of kindness. Still willing to connect with people even after loss. That's not pity talking, that's admiration. Ava's expression softened slightly. Then admire me enough to let me figure out my own path, even if it's messier than the one you could provide. Okay. Mason raised his hands in surrender. No more offers, no more trying to fix things. I'll just shut up and stay out of your way. I don't want you to stay out of my way. The words came out quieter. I just want you to trust that I know what I'm doing with my own life. Done. They stood there in the kitchen, the tension that had dominated the past 2 weeks finally easing into something more manageable. Ava smiled, small but real. We're kind of a mess, aren't we? She said. Completely. Emma deserves better than watching us stumble around each other. Yeah, she does. Mason moved closer, not touching but near enough to matter. So what do we do about this? Whatever this is becoming. I don't know. Ava's voice dropped even lower. Because it's definitely becoming something, and that scares me almost as much as I think it scares you. I'm terrified, Mason admitted, of caring about someone again, of letting Emma care about someone who might not stay, of wanting things I convinced myself I didn't deserve anymore. What things? You. The word hung between them, raw and honest. I want you around. Not just for Emma, for me. And I have no idea what to do with that. Ava's breath caught. Mason? Daddy! Ava! Emma's voice rang out from the art room. Come look! I finished the sunset part. The moment shattered. Ava stepped back, Mason cleared his throat, and they both headed toward Emma's excited summons like nothing had happened. But something had happened. They'd both admitted it, and ignoring it was becoming impossible. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm, one that felt less like careful boundaries and more like something organic taking shape. Ava still came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but now she sometimes arrived early or stayed late, and the conversations between her and Mason became longer, more substantial, moving beyond small talk into territory that mattered. They talked about grief, about the different shapes loss took. Ava told him about her mother's final weeks, about the guilt of feeling relieved when it ended. Mason told her about Sarah's last days in the hospital, about the promises he'd made that he couldn't keep, about the crushing weight of surviving when the person you loved didn't. They talked about Emma, about parenting alone, about the terror of being someone's entire world. Ava shared stories from her childhood, about the single mother who'd raised her, about learning early that love didn't require perfection. They talked about dreams deferred and futures uncertain and the strange space between giving up and holding on. And slowly, carefully, without either of them quite meaning to, they became friends. It was mid-November when Emma got sick. Nothing serious, just a nasty flu that knocked her flat, but enough to keep her home from school for a week. Mason canceled meetings, worked from home, played nurse while Emma alternated between feverish sleep and cranky wakefulness. On Wednesday, Ava showed up despite it not being her usual day. "I brought soup," she said when Mason answered the door, holding up a container, "and ginger ale, and some art supplies that don't require much energy in case she's bored. You didn't have to do that." "I know, but she texted me, well, voice texted with your permission, I assume, and said she was dying of boredom, so here I am." Mason stepped aside to let her in, something warm unfurling in his chest at the simple fact of her showing up. "She's upstairs, fair warning, she's been pretty dramatic about the whole thing." "She's 6 and sick. Dramatic is basically required." Emma's face lit up when Ava appeared in her doorway. "You came! Daddy said you were busy." "I was, but I decided you were more important than organizing someone's filing system." Ava set down her supplies, pressed a hand to Emma's forehead. "You're still warm." "The thermometer says 100.2, Emma reported importantly. "Yesterday it was 100.6, so I'm getting better, but also I might still die." "I don't think you're going to die." "Daddy says that too, but he could be lying to make me feel better." "Your dad's not lying. Trust me, I've seen him lie. He's terrible at it." Mason, leaning in the doorway, raised an eyebrow. "When have you seen me lie?" "Last week when Emma asked if you liked her new painting and you said it was beautiful even though you clearly had no idea what it was supposed to be." "It was abstract." "It was a horse." Emma giggled, which turned into a cough. Ava rubbed her back until it subsided, then got her settled against pillows with the soup and a gentle art project that involved stickers more than actual painting. Mason went back to his home office, but found himself unable to concentrate. He kept hearing Emma's laughter drifting down the hall, kept thinking about Ava showing up on a Wednesday just because Emma asked, kept processing the strange domesticity of having someone else in the house who genuinely cared about his daughter's well-being. Around 7, Ava knocked on his office door. "She's asleep," Ava reported. "Fever's down a bit. I think she just needed some distraction." "Thank you for coming. You really didn't have to." "I wanted to." Ava hesitated in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you hire me that night? For the gala? Patricia must have had dozens of options. Why me?" Mason set down his pen, considered the question. "Honestly, I have no idea. Patricia sent me your photo and something about your eyes looked real, like you'd actually lived through things instead of just floating through life on easy mode. I thought maybe you'd understand why I needed to get through that night without falling apart." "Did I? Help you get through it?" "You did. And then you kept helping, with Emma, with me, even when I didn't deserve it. You deserve more credit than you give yourself." Ava moved into the office, settled into the chair across from his desk. "You're a good father, Mason. You're trying so hard, and Emma sees that. She knows she's loved." "Is it enough? Just love when I'm clearly screwing up half the time?" "Nobody gets parenting perfect. The trying is what matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Ava said, Emma asked me something today, while you were on that conference call. What? She asked if I was going to be her new mom. Mason's stomach dropped. What did you tell her? I told her that wasn't how it worked, that I couldn't replace her mom and wouldn't want to try, but that I cared about her very much and would keep coming around as long as she wanted me to. Ava met his eyes. Was that the right answer? I don't know, probably. She's been asking me about dating for months now. Keeps suggesting random women she meets. Her teacher, the barista at the coffee shop we go to, one time the FedEx delivery driver. She wants you to be happy. She wants a complete family. Those aren't the same thing. Aren't they? At least a little bit? Mason didn't have an answer for that. Because maybe Emma was right. Maybe happiness did require other people. Required risking connection, even when every instinct screamed that connection meant vulnerability, meant loss. Do you ever think about it? Ava asked quietly. Dating again? Finding someone new? Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep and the house feels too empty, but then morning comes and I remember why I stopped thinking about it. Because you're scared. Because I'm realistic. Lightning doesn't strike twice. I had something good with Sarah, something most people never find. Expecting to find that again feels greedy. Or maybe, Ava said carefully, it feels impossible because you're comparing every potential future to a past you've idealized. The words stung because they were true. Mason had spent 3 years turning Sarah into a saint, their marriage into something perfect, their love into the kind of fairy tale that couldn't exist in reality. It was easier than admitting they'd had problems too, had fought sometimes, had struggled through difficult patches like every couple did. She wasn't perfect, he admitted. Sarah, we weren't perfect. I forgot that. Somewhere along the way, I turned her into this impossible standard that nobody could meet, including yourself, especially myself. Ava stood, moved to the window overlooking the darkened grounds. My mom and I fought the last time I saw her lucid. She wanted me to leave, to go back to school, to stop wasting my life taking care of her. I told her she was being selfish, that I was exactly where I wanted to be. She pressed her hand against the glass. I lied. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be anywhere else, and she knew it. And she died knowing I'd given up everything for her while resenting her for it. Ava, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I get it. The guilt. The what-ifs. The way we turn dead people into perfect beings we could never live up to. But they were just people, Mason. Flawed and complicated and human. And loving them doesn't mean we can't love anyone else. Mason stood, crossed to where she stood by the window. Is that what this is? Love? She turned to face him, and they were close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could count her breaths. I don't know what this is, she whispered, but it's something, and it's getting harder to pretend it's not. Mason's hand came up, almost of its own volition, cupping her face. Ava's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. I'm still terrified, he said. Me too. This could end badly. It probably will end badly. Probably. But I think, his thumb brushed across her cheekbone, I think I want to try anyway. Mason, he kissed her, soft and tentative and scared, like someone touching fire for the first time. Ava made a small sound, surprised, then her hands came up to grip his shirt and she kissed him back. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, maybe forever. Time stopped meaning anything. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ava pressed her forehead against his. We can't, she said, even as her hand stayed fisted in his shirt. Emma, the complications, everything, I know. This is a terrible idea. The worst. We should stop before it gets messy. Definitely. Neither of them moved. From upstairs came a small voice. Daddy, I need water. Reality crashed back. They stepped apart, and Mason saw panic flash across Ava's face before she schooled her expression into something calmer. I should go, she said. Ava, wait. We'll talk later when we've both thought about this. She grabbed her bag, headed for the door. Take care of Emma. I'll see you Thursday. Maybe. I don't know. She fled, and Mason stood in his office, his lips still tingling, his heart racing, wondering what the hell he'd just done, and whether he'd destroyed the best thing to happen to his family in years. Upstairs, Emma called again for water, and Mason pushed everything else aside to be a father. But later, after Emma was settled and sleeping, after the house went quiet and dark, Mason stood at his bedroom window and thought about Ava's kiss, about the way she'd felt in his arms, about the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was ready to risk his heart again. Thursday came. Ava didn't. Emma stood at the living room window at 4:15 on Thursday, her face pressed against the glass, watching the driveway with the kind of desperate hope that made Mason's chest hurt. "She's just late," Emma said for the third time. "Maybe there was traffic, or maybe she had to work late, or maybe she's not coming, sweetheart." Mason kept his voice gentle, even though his own disappointment felt like a physical weight. "Sometimes things come up, but she always comes on Thursdays, always, she promised. I know, but people break promises sometimes, even when they don't mean to." Emma's shoulders slumped. She stayed at the window another 5 minutes before finally turning away, her eyes too bright. "I'm going to my room. I'm not crying, I just want to be alone." She disappeared upstairs, and Mason stood in the empty living room, feeling like he'd broken something irreplaceable. He pulled out his phone, stared at the message thread with Ava. His last text, sent this morning, sat there unanswered. "Still coming today?" No response. No explanation. Nothing. He typed out another message, deleted it, typed again. Finally settled on, "Emma's asking for you. If you're not coming, just let me know so I can tell her." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared? Appeared again. Finally, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." Mason's stomach dropped. He called immediately. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Ava, pick up, please. Whatever you're thinking, whatever Wednesday night made you feel, we can talk about it. Just don't disappear on Emma. She doesn't deserve that." He hung up, called again, voicemail again. The 3rd time he called, she answered. "Mason, stop." Her voice sounded rough, like she'd been crying. "I meant what I said. I can't do this." "Can't do what? Come see a 6-year-old who adores you, or can't deal with whatever's happening between us?" "Both, either. I don't know." He heard her take a shaky breath. "I got too close. I let myself care too much, and now it's complicated and messy, and I can't be what Emma needs me to be because I'm too busy wanting things I shouldn't want." "What things?" "You know what things." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You. This family. A life I have no right to want because it's not mine and it never will be." "Why can't it be yours?" "Because I'm not her mother, Mason. I'm the woman you hired to get through one uncomfortable evening, and somehow I turned into this person who shows up at your house twice a week and plays pretend family. But that's all it is. Pretend. And the longer it goes on, the more it's going to hurt when it ends." "What if it doesn't have to end?" Silence. Then, "Don't say things like that. Don't give me hope for something impossible." "Why is it impossible?" "Because you're still in love with your dead wife." The words came out sharp and desperate. "Because Emma wants a mother, and I'm just a substitute for something she can't have back. Because I'm broken and completely wrong for your life, and the only reason you kissed me is because you're lonely and I was convenient." "That's not true." Mason's grip tightened on his phone. "Yes, I loved Sarah. I'll always love her. But that doesn't mean I can't have feelings for you. And Emma doesn't see you as a substitute. She sees you as Ava, someone who showed up and cared about her for who she is, not because you had to, but because you wanted to." "I do want to. That's the problem. I want it too much." Her voice cracked. "I want to be there for her birthday parties and school plays and all the small moments that matter. I want to help her through nightmares and teach her to paint and watch her grow up. And I want—" She stopped. "What?" Mason pressed. "What else do you want?" "You." "I want you. And that's terrifying because you're not ready, and maybe you'll never be ready. And I can't keep putting myself in a position where I'm waiting for you to choose me when part of you is still choosing her." The accusation stung because it held truth. Mason was still choosing Sarah in 1,000 small ways, keeping her photos everywhere, comparing every moment to how it used to be, holding on to grief like it was the only thing keeping her memory alive. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm not entirely ready. I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm trying, Ava. For the first time in 3 years, I'm actually trying to move forward instead of just surviving, and that's because of you." That's not enough. Don't you see? I can't be the person who pulls you out of grief. You have to do that yourself. And until you do, anything between us is just going to be shadows of what it could be. Then help me. Words came out raw. Don't run away. Stay. Figure this out with me. I can't. I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't keep doing this. She hung up. Mason tried calling back 3 more times. All went to voicemail. He sent texts that went unanswered, and finally, standing in his too quiet house with his daughter crying upstairs and his chest feeling like someone had reached in and squeezed, he accepted that Ava was gone. Emma didn't come down for dinner. Mason brought her food on a tray, but she barely touched it. Is Ava mad at me? She asked, her voice small. No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. Then why did she leave? Because adults are complicated and messy, and sometimes we ruin good things by being scared. Are you scared? Terrified. Emma considered this, picking at her blanket. Mommy used to say being scared means you care. That if you're not scared of losing something, it probably wasn't worth having. Mason's throat closed. Sarah had said that during one of their early fights about his workaholic tendencies. He'd forgotten until now. Your mom was very smart. Then if you're scared, doesn't that mean Ava is worth having? So why did you let her go? I didn't. Mason stopped. Because Emma was right. He had let her go. Not by pushing her away directly, but by not fighting hard enough to make her stay. By not giving her a reason to believe this could work. I messed up, he admitted. I kissed her, and it scared both of us. And instead of talking about it like adults, we both panicked. You kissed her? Emma's eyes went wide. Like a real kiss? On the mouth? Yes. And she kissed you back? She did. Then why is she gone? If you both like each other and I like her and she likes me, why can't she just stay? Because it's more complicated than that, Em. Ava's dealing with her own stuff, and I'm still figuring out how to be happy again after being sad for so long. And sometimes timing is wrong even when everything else is right. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then, I think you should go get her. What? Like in movies. When people love each other but they're being dumb about it, someone has to do the big gesture thing, the running through the airport or the standing outside with a boombox or whatever. Life doesn't work like movies, sweetheart. Maybe it should. Emma sat up, suddenly animated. Maybe if you try hard enough, if you show her you really care, she'll come back. You just have to be brave. Mason looked at his daughter, at her hope-filled eyes and absolute certainty that love could fix everything if people just tried hard enough. Part of him wanted to explain that reality was messier than fairy tales, that grand gestures didn't solve fundamental incompatibilities. But another part, the part that had been dormant for 3 years, wondered if maybe Emma was right. Maybe trying was better than giving up. Maybe risking rejection was better than accepting loss without a fight. Let me think about it, he said finally. Don't think too long. Mommy always said you thought too much and felt too little. Another Sarah quote, and another truth Mason had spent years avoiding. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, Mason sat in his office and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He pulled out the box of Sarah's things from the bottom drawer of his desk. Letters she'd written him, photos from their wedding, small mementos from their years together. At the bottom of the box was a letter, sealed in an envelope with his name on it. Sarah had written it 2 days before she died, when she was still lucid enough to know the end was coming. The nurses had given it to him at the hospital, but Mason had never opened it. Reading her last words felt too final, too much like accepting she was really gone. Now, his hands shaking, he broke the seal. Dear Mason, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And knowing you, you're probably punishing yourself for not saving me, or for saying the wrong thing that last day, or for some other imagined failure that exists only in your head. Stop it. You were the best husband I could have asked for. Not perfect. Remember that fight about the Christmas tree? You were completely wrong, by the way, but present, loving, willing to try even when things got hard. I know you're going to want to freeze everything in place after I'm gone, to turn our life together into some kind of shrine. But please don't. I don't want to be your excuse for not living. Emma needs you happy, not just functional. She needs to see you take risks, fall in love, build a life that's more than just going through the motions. And you need that too, even if you can't see it right now. I'm not saying forget me. But don't let loving me stop you from loving someone else. My heart was big enough to love you and Emma and my mom and my best friend and about a dozen other people all at once. Yours is too, so please. When enough time has passed and you meet someone who makes you laugh or makes Emma smile or just makes the house feel less empty, don't run away from it. Don't use my memory as a shield against being hurt again. Live, Mason. Really love. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love, Sarah P.S. When you do fall in love again, make sure she's not boring. I refuse to be replaced by someone boring. Mason read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face, Sarah's words breaking through the careful walls he'd built. She'd known him too well, had predicted exactly how he'd react to loss. And she'd tried, even from beyond death, to give him permission to be happy again. He pulled out his phone, looked at Ava's last message. I can't do this anymore. Then he started typing. The message he wrote was long and rambling and probably too honest, but he sent it anyway. You're right. I'm still choosing Sarah in a lot of ways. I kept her photos everywhere because I was afraid Emma would forget her. I avoided dating because comparing anyone to what we had seemed impossible. I turned my grief into armor because it felt safer than being vulnerable again. But tonight I read a letter Sarah wrote me before she died, and she told me not to do exactly what I've been doing. She told me to live, to let myself love someone new, to stop using her memory as an excuse for being alone. I don't know if I'm ready for everything you want or everything Emma needs, but I know I want to try. And I know that letting you walk away without fighting for this is the kind of regret I'll carry forever. So I'm asking you to give me another chance. Not to be perfect or to have all the answers, but to figure this out together. To be messy and scared and uncertain, but at least be those things while moving forward instead of standing still. Emma misses you. I miss you. And I think maybe you miss us too. If I'm wrong, tell me and I'll accept it. But if I'm right, if any part of you wants this to work, please don't give up on us yet. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then sat staring at his phone like he could will a response into existence. Nothing. An hour passed. Then 2. Mason finally went to bed around 1 a.m., his phone on the nightstand, still hoping. He woke to sunlight streaming through his windows and Emma jumping on his bed. Daddy! Daddy, wake up! Ava's here! Mason bolted upright, disoriented. What? She's downstairs. She brought breakfast and she said she wants to talk to you, and she said... Emma stopped, her expression turning serious. Actually, she said she wants to talk to you alone first, which means it's important adult stuff. Mason's heart was racing. He grabbed a t-shirt, tried to smooth his hair down, probably looked like a disaster but didn't care. He found Ava in his kitchen, setting out pastries and coffee, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. Hi, she said when she saw him. Hi. I got your message. Around 3 a.m., because I couldn't sleep. And I read it probably 20 times before I decided to come over. She gripped the counter. I'm still scared. I'm still not sure this is a good idea, but you were right about one thing. What's that? I do miss you, both of you. And I've spent 2 days trying to convince myself that walking away was smart and safe and the right choice. She looked up at him. But it just feels like giving up. And I've given up enough things in my life. I don't want this to be another one. Mason moved closer, carefully, like she might spook. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. For real this time. Not just as Emma's friend or as someone who shows up twice a week. I want to see if this thing between us can actually become something. She took a shaky breath. But I need you to be sure. Because if we do this and it doesn't work out, it's going to hurt Emma. And she's already had enough hurt for one lifetime. I know, I'm terrified of that too. So what do we do? Mason thought about Sarah's letter, about her insistence that he live instead of just surviving. Thought about Emma's hope that love could fix everything if people just tried. Thought about the past 2 days without Ava and how wrong they'd felt. We take it slow, he said finally. We're honest with Emma about what's happening. We don't make promises we can't keep, and we accept that this might not work out, but at least we gave it a real chance. That's terrifyingly reasonable. I'm occasionally capable of reason. Occasionally, Ava's lips twitched in a small smile. There's something else. About the money and the job offers and all that. I'm sorry I reacted so badly. You were trying to help, and I made it about pride and independence when maybe it was really about fear of owing someone. You don't owe me anything, Ava. Then or now? I know, but I want to contribute. If we're doing this, really doing this, I need to be a partner, not a project, which means I need to figure out my own financial situation, get a real job, finish my degree on my own timeline, build something I can be proud of. Okay, I respect that. Just promise you'll let me help sometimes. When it makes sense. When it's not about charity, but about being someone who cares about you. Deal. She stepped closer until they were almost touching. Can I ask you something? Anything. Sarah's letter. What did it say? Mason pulled it from his pocket. He'd been carrying it since last night, like a talisman. She told me not to use her as an excuse for not living, to let myself fall in love again, to find someone who makes Emma smile and makes the house feel less empty. He met Ava's eyes. She told me to make sure that person wasn't boring. Well, Ava's smile grew. I think I can manage not being boring. Can I kiss you again, with proper context this time and not in a moment of panic? I'd be disappointed if you didn't. This kiss was different from Wednesday night. Slower, more certain, less like falling and more like choosing. Ava's hands slid up to his shoulders. Mason's arms wrapped around her waist. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. From the doorway came an exaggerated gagging sound. They broke apart to find Emma watching them, her expression torn between delight and disgust. That's so gross, she announced, but also I'm really happy about it. Can we talk about what this means now? Are you boyfriend and girlfriend? Are you getting married? Am I going to be a flower girl? Emma, slow down, Mason started. We're seeing if we like each other as more than friends, Ava interrupted, dropping to Emma's level. Which means we're going to spend more time together, all three of us, and see if this works. But it also means things might be confusing sometimes, or weird, and you get to have feelings about all of that. What if I have happy feelings? Then that's wonderful. What if I have sad feelings because I miss Mommy, and this makes me think about how she's not here? Ava didn't flinch from the question. Then that's okay too. Missing your mom doesn't mean you can't be happy about this. You can feel both things at once. Emma thought about this seriously. Can I still call you Ava? I don't want to call you Mom because that's confusing, and also I already had a mom. You can absolutely call me Ava. That's who I am. Okay, good. Emma seemed satisfied. Can we have those pastries now? I'm starving, and also I want to hear all about how Daddy's kiss was because he's probably terrible at it since he hasn't practiced in forever. Emma, Mason's face heated. What? It's a valid question. Ava was laughing, the kind of real laughter that transformed her whole face. How about we eat breakfast and talk about literally anything else? They settled at the kitchen table, the three of them, and it felt natural in a way that should have been terrifying, but somehow wasn't. Emma chattered about her plans for the weekend, asking if Ava could come to the park with them, suggesting they could get ice cream after, planning a future like it was already guaranteed. Mason met Ava's eyes over Emma's head, saw his own cautious hope reflected there. This wasn't going to be simple. There would be hard conversations ahead, moments of doubt, times when grief surfaced unexpectedly and complicated everything. Emma would have days where she struggled with the change, where missing Sarah would hurt more because of Ava's presence. Ava would have moments of feeling like an outsider, of wondering if she could ever really belong in a family built on someone else's foundation. But maybe that was okay. Maybe love didn't require perfection or certainty. Maybe it just required showing up, being honest, and choosing each other even when it was hard. The next few weeks unfolded in a pattern that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ava came over more frequently, sometimes staying for dinner, occasionally staying late enough that Emma would fall asleep during movie night and need to be carried to bed. Mason and Ava stole moments alone when they could, conversations on the back patio after Emma was asleep, early morning coffee before she woke up, texts throughout the day that made Mason smile during board meetings. They kept it quiet at first, not hiding exactly, but not broadcasting either. Emma knew, of course, and seemed delighted by the development even as she occasionally had moments of confusion or sadness about what it all meant. Mason's staff noticed the changes too, the way his mood improved, the way he started leaving work at reasonable hours, the woman who was around more and more frequently. Patricia cornered him about it 3 weeks after the kitchen reconciliation. So, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with a knowing smile. Want to tell me what's going on with you and Ava? We're seeing each other, trying to anyway. I knew it. The moment I sent her to that gala, I knew. Patricia looked insufferably pleased with herself. You two have a spark. Anyone with eyes could see it. Did you set me up intentionally? Let's call it a happy accident. I genuinely thought she'd be professional and appropriate for the event. The chemistry was a bonus. Mason shook his head, but he was smiling. Thank you. For the happy accident. Just don't screw it up. She's good for you. Good for Emma, too. I'm trying not to. Try harder. Men are idiots about these things. The first real test came on Thanksgiving. Emma had been looking forward to it for weeks, had already planned the entire menu with Mrs. Chen, had made construction paper turkeys to decorate the dining room. 2 days before the holiday, she asked the question Mason had been dreading. Is Ava coming for Thanksgiving? Mason had been planning a quiet dinner, just the two of them, the way they'd done for the past 3 years. Safe, controlled, no risk of new traditions replacing old ones. I hadn't asked her yet, he said carefully. Would you want her here? Obviously. She's part of our family now. Kind of, right? Kind of, Mason agreed, his chest tight. So she should be here, but... Emma's face scrunched up in concentration. What about Mommy? We always talk about Mommy on Thanksgiving. We say the things we're thankful she gave us. Will that be weird if Ava's here? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe a little. We should ask her if it would make her uncomfortable. Because if it does, maybe we could do the mommy stuff before she comes and then have regular Thanksgiving after. The suggestion was so thoughtful, so considerate of everyone's feelings, that Mason felt his eyes sting. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Mason texted Ava that evening. Emma wants you to come for Thanksgiving. But we have a tradition of talking about Sarah and what we're grateful she gave us. Emma's worried it might make you uncomfortable. Thoughts? Ava's response came quickly. I'd be honored to be there, and I think including Sarah in the day makes sense. She's part of your family, part of Emma. Pretending otherwise would be weirder than acknowledging it. You're sure? I'm sure. Besides, I'm curious what 6-year-old Emma is thankful for this year. Probably chicken nuggets and the color purple. Solid choices. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. Ava showed up at 10 with homemade pumpkin pie and a nervous smile. Emma immediately dragged her into the kitchen to help with cooking preparations, leaving Mason to watch them work together. Ava patiently teaching Emma how to mash potatoes, Emma chattering nonstop about the turkey Mrs. Chen had prepared, both of them laughing when flour ended up everywhere except in the bowl. Before dinner, they gathered in the living room the way they always did. Mason pulled out the photo album, the one filled with pictures of Sarah from all stages of her life. Emma curled up between him and Ava on the couch, completely comfortable with the arrangement. Okay, Emma said seriously. I'll go first. I'm thankful Mommy taught me to be brave even when I'm scared, and that she loved purple as much as I do, and that she picked Daddy to be my dad because he's pretty good at it most of the time. Most of the time? Mason raised an eyebrow. Sometimes you're annoying, but in a dad way, so it's okay. Mason went next, the words harder than they'd been in previous years but still necessary. I'm thankful she gave me Emma, and that she taught me how to love someone completely, even when it's scary, and that she left me with so many good memories that the sad ones don't take up as much space anymore. It was Ava who surprised him by speaking next. I never met your mom, she said to Emma, but I'm thankful for her too. For raising someone as amazing as you, and for loving your dad so well that he knows what real love looks like. That makes everything else easier. Emma leaned against Ava's shoulder. I think Mommy would like you. She always said the best people are the ones who show up when things are hard, not just when they're easy. And you showed up. Yeah, Ava's voice was thick. I did. They moved to the dining room after that, the mood shifting from bittersweet to celebratory. Dinner was chaotic and delicious and filled with the kind of easy conversation that made Mason realize this was working. They were building something new without erasing what came before. After Emma went to bed, overfull and happy, Mason and Ava cleaned up the kitchen together. Thank you, he said, drying dishes while she washed. For today. For understanding about Sarah. For not making Emma choose between her mom and you. I'd never ask her to choose. Sarah's her mother. I'm just... Ava trailed off. What? I don't know what I am yet, but I know I care about both of you, and I know today felt right in a way I wasn't expecting. Mason set down the dish towel, pulled her close. It did feel right. Terrifyingly right. Why terrifying? Because I'm falling in love with you. The words came out before he could stop them, honest and raw. And that's still scary as hell. Ava's breath caught. Mason, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know that this isn't casual for me. That when I look at you with Emma, when I watch you fit into our lives like you've always been here, I see a future I stopped believing in. I'm falling too, she whispered. Have been for a while now, but I kept telling myself it was too soon, too complicated, too much risk. And now? Now I think maybe the risk is worth it. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I love you. I love Emma. I love this weird, complicated, beautiful thing we're building. And yeah, it's terrifying. But so is every good thing worth having. Mason kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both smiling, he realized something fundamental had shifted. He wasn't just surviving anymore. Wasn't just going through the motions of living while his heart stayed frozen in the past. He was happy. Really, genuinely happy. And for the first time in 3 years, that didn't feel like a betrayal of Sarah's memory. It felt like honoring it. December arrived with unexpected snow, the kind that turned the city into a postcard and made Emma lose her mind with excitement. She insisted they build a snowman, then a snow fort, then an entire snow family complete with a snow dog that looked more like a blob than any recognizable animal. Ava was there for all of it, her cheeks pink from cold, her laughter echoing across the yard. Mason watched them together and felt his heart swell with something he'd thought he'd lost forever, hope for the future. That night, after Emma was asleep and Ava was getting ready to leave, Mason stopped her at the door. Stay, he said. It's late. I should. Stay, please. Not for anything except falling asleep next to me and waking up here tomorrow. I want you here when Emma wakes up. I want this to be your home too, if you want it. Ava's eyes searched his face. You're sure? More sure than I've been about anything in years. She stayed. And the next morning, when Emma found them both in the kitchen making breakfast together, her squeal of delight was loud enough to wake the neighbors. Does this mean Ava lives here now? Not yet, Mason said, but maybe someday soon, if she wants to. Emma turned to Ava with hopeful eyes. Do you want to? I think I do, Ava said softly. Yeah, I really think I do. And standing there in his kitchen with the two people he loved most, Mason Reed finally understood what Sarah had tried to tell him in that letter. Loving someone new didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant honoring it by choosing to live fully in the present. It meant letting grief soften into memory while making room for joy to return. It meant believing in second chances, even when first chances ended in heartbreak. It meant being brave enough to love again. Ava moved in 2 weeks before Christmas, bringing with her 3 suitcases, 2 boxes of art supplies, and a lifetime of careful independence she was learning to set aside. Emma helped her unpack, narrating every item like a documentary. This is Ava's favorite sweater. It's purple, which means she has excellent taste. This is a picture of her mom. She looks nice. This is a rock. I don't know why Ava has a rock in her suitcase, but I'm not judging. It's from a beach my mom loved, Ava explained, turning the smooth stone over in her hand. I kept it after she died. Reminder that beautiful things still exist even when you're sad. Emma studied the rock seriously. I have one of Mommy's necklaces. Daddy keeps it in a box for when I'm older, but sometimes I look at it and remember her smell. Is that weird? Not even a little bit weird. Mason watched from the doorway, his chest tight with the realization that this was real. Ava's clothes hanging in his closet, her toothbrush next to his in the bathroom. Her presence woven into the fabric of his daily life in ways that felt both foreign and completely right. That night, after Emma was asleep, they sat together on the couch in the quiet of the house that was finally becoming theirs instead of just his. Second thoughts? Ava asked, reading something in his expression. Constantly. You? Every 5 minutes. She leaned her head on his shoulder. But then I remember that being scared doesn't mean being wrong. It just means caring enough to worry about losing it. Emma's mom used to say something like that. I know, Emma told me. Ava was quiet for a moment. Does it bother you that I talk to her about Sarah? I don't want to overstep, but Emma asks questions and I don't want to avoid them just because it's complicated. It doesn't bother me. I think... Mason paused, searching for the right words. I think Sarah would like that you don't try to replace her, that you make space for her in Emma's life, even though she's not here. She's always going to be here. In Emma, in the stories, in the ways you loved her that taught you how to love, period. Ava lifted her head to look at him. I'm not competing with a ghost, Mason. I'm just trying to be present for the people in front of me. You're better at this than I deserve. Probably. But you're stuck with me now, so you'll just have to deal with it. The first real fight came 3 weeks later, over something stupid that spiraled into something bigger the way fights do when people are learning to live together. Mason had made plans for a work dinner without telling Ava, who'd already invited her old roommate over for the same night. Emma had a school project due the next morning that neither of them had known about. The evening devolved into chaos, Mason canceling last minute and pissing off a major client, Ava's friend showing up to an awkward situation, Emma melting down over glitter and poster board at 9 p.m. By the time Emma was finally in bed, both adults were exhausted and irritable. You should have checked with me before making plans, Ava said, scrubbing glitter off the kitchen table with more force than necessary. I've been making my own plans for 3 years. I forgot I needed to check in. Well, you do now. That's what living with someone means. I know what it means. I was married, remember? The words hung in the air, sharp and defensive. Ava stopped scrubbing. Right, of course. How could I forget? Her voice went cold in that way that meant he'd hurt her. The perfect first marriage that I'm constantly being measured against. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Because every time we have a problem, you retreat into this version of your past where everything was easier and better and I'm just the complicated present you have to deal with. That's not fair. Neither is being compared to a dead woman I can never measure up to. The words exploded between them, too loud in the quiet kitchen. Ava's hand flew to her mouth like she could take them back, but it was too late. Mason felt like he'd been punched. You think I'm comparing you to Sarah? Aren't you? Every time you mention how she would have handled something, or how things used to be, or how marriage is supposed to work based on your previous experience, what am I supposed to think? I'm not trying to compare, I'm fumbling through this because I don't know how to be in a relationship anymore. It's been 3 years and everything's different and I'm doing my best, but apparently my best isn't good enough. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. They stood there breathing hard, both miserable, both right and wrong in equal measure. Finally, Mason sat down at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. How to be with you without constantly worrying I'm going to screw it up. How to let you in without feeling guilty that I'm moving on. How to build something new when the old thing still takes up so much space in my head. Ava sat down across from him. I don't know how to do this either. How to love someone else's child without overstepping. How to live in a house filled with reminders of a woman I never met. How to believe I deserve this when part of me still thinks I'm just the poor girl who got lucky. You're not, I know. In my head, I know. But feelings don't care about logic. She reached across the table, took his hand. I'm sorry for the dead woman comment. That was cruel and I didn't mean it. I'm sorry too for making you feel like you're being measured. You're not. You're just you, and that's more than enough. Even when I'm a mess? Especially then. I don't want perfect, Ava. Perfect is exhausting. I just want real. They sat in the quiet, hands linked across the table, two broken people trying to build something whole. We're going to fight again, Ava said finally. Probably about stupid stuff, probably more than once. Definitely. But we talk about it after. We don't run away or shut down or pretend everything's fine when it's not. Deal. And you stop mentally comparing me to Sarah, and I stop assuming you are, even when you're not. Also deal. Ava smiled, tired but genuine. We're kind of terrible at this. The worst. Emma's going to grow up thinking all relationships involve dramatic kitchen arguments. She'll be well prepared for real life then. They cleaned up the glitter disaster together, and when they finally made it to bed, Ava curled against Mason's side in the dark. I love you, she whispered. Even when you're being an idiot. I love you too, even when you're being impossible. We're going to be okay, right? Yeah, Mason said, and for the first time he actually believed it. We're going to be okay. February brought Emma's 7th birthday, which she announced should be the best party ever, because now I have 2 parents to plan it instead of just one. I'm not technically your parent, Ava corrected gently. More like a really involved adult who lives here. That's basically a parent. Can we have a unicorn theme? And a dragon theme? And also a science theme because Tyler said girls don't like science and I need to prove him wrong. Tyler sounds like he needs better education, Ava muttered. They threw Emma the kind of party that would have made Mason's head explode a year ago. 20 screaming children, a science demonstration involving vinegar and baking soda that got everywhere, and a cake shaped like a dragon-unicorn hybrid that barely survived transportation from the bakery. Mason stood in the corner of the chaos watching Ava coordinate pin the tail on the dragon while simultaneously preventing 2 kids from eating glitter and explaining oxidation to a fascinated group of 7-year-olds. She looked overwhelmed and happy and completely at home in a way that made his heart do complicated things. Patricia appeared at his elbow, surveying the disaster with amusement. You know, when I sent Ava to that gala, I didn't expect it to result in birthday parties featuring dragon science. Neither did I. But it works. She works. You look happy, Mason. Actually happy, not just functional. I am. Terrified most of the time, but happy. That's love. Terror and happiness in equal measure. The party wound down eventually, leaving behind a living room that looked like a craft store had exploded. Emma, exhausted and sugar-crashed, fell asleep on the couch while they cleaned up. I have something for you, Ava said, pulling a wrapped package from her bag. For Emma, but I wanted to check with you first before I gave it to her. Mason opened it carefully. Inside was a photo album, but not a regular one. Ava had created something incredible. Pages that wove together photos of Sarah with photos of their new life. Emma as a baby with Sarah. Emma now with Ava. The 3 of them at Thanksgiving. Sarah and Mason on their wedding day. Mason and Ava at the gala where this all started. I thought, Ava's voice was uncertain. I thought maybe Emma should have something that shows her whole story. Not just before or after her mom died, but everything together. Her complete family, past and present. But if it's too much or if you think it's inappropriate, it's perfect. Mason's voice was rough. It's exactly what she needs. They gave it to Emma the next morning. She studied each page with careful attention, occasionally asking questions about Sarah, sometimes pointing out funny moments from recent photos. When she finished, she looked up at both of them with serious eyes. I have 2 families, she announced. My first family with Mommy and Daddy, and my second family with Daddy and Ava. And that's okay because some people don't even get 1 family and I got 2. That's exactly right, Ava said softly. Does that make you my bonus mom? Ava glanced at Mason, who nodded slightly. If you want me to be. Emma considered this. Not my mom, because I have one of those and she's in heaven or the stars or wherever people go, but my bonus mom who's here now and helps with homework and makes bad jokes and loves me anyway. I would be honored to be your bonus mom. Good. Because I already told Tyler you were basically my mom, and I don't want to be a liar. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, bringing with it decisions that had been simmering for months. Ava had been taking online classes toward her degree, squeezing coursework between her part-time job and time with Emma. Mason had been quietly paying her tuition despite their agreement, funneling money through a scholarship he'd created specifically for her. She found out in April. Mason Reed, what the hell is the Carter Education Fund? He looked up from his laptop to find Ava standing in his office doorway, holding a letter from the university, her expression somewhere between furious and touched. It's a scholarship fund for students who had to leave school to care for sick family members. Completely legitimate. Helps about a dozen people a year. And one of those people just happens to be your girlfriend who specifically told you not to pay for her education. You told me not to pay you directly. This is a scholarship. You earned it by applying and meeting the criteria. Criteria you designed specifically for my situation. Can you prove that? Ava stared at him, then started laughing despite herself. You're unbelievable. Is sneaky and manipulative and completely unbelievable. I prefer resourceful. I should be furious with you. Are you? She crossed the room, settled into his lap, her anger already fading. No, I'm annoyed that you found a loophole, but I'm also... She stopped, her eyes suddenly bright. Nobody's ever fought for me like this. Respected my boundaries while still trying to help. It's kind of infuriating and wonderful at the same time. I can shut down the fund if you really want. Don't you dare. There are other people benefiting from it now, but you're still a sneaky bastard. I can live with that. She kissed him, soft and slow, and Mason thought about how far they'd come from that first awkward gala. How this woman who'd started as a stranger had become the person who knew him best, who called him on his bullshit while still loving him anyway. Marry me, he said against her lips. Ava pulled back, eyes wide. What? Marry me. Not right now, not tomorrow, but eventually, when you're ready, when it feels right, just say you'll think about it. Mason, we've only been together 6 months. I know. And I'm not saying we rush into anything. I just need you to know that this is where I'm heading, that you're not temporary or transitional. You're it for me. What about Emma? Shouldn't you ask her first? I did, last week. She said, and I quote, obviously you should marry Ava. She's perfect, and also she's already living here, so you might as well make it official. Ava laughed, tears spilling over. She did not say that. She absolutely did. That child has no filter. I need time. To finish school, to figure out my career, to be sure I'm not just playing house with your family. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Ask me again in a year, when I've graduated and found a real job and proven to myself that I can stand on my own even while standing next to you. Deal. And it better be a good proposal, like really good. None of this casual office conversation nonsense. Noted. I'll plan something appropriately dramatic. With Emma's help. Obviously, she'd murder me if I left her out. They sat together in his office, Ava in his lap, both of them smiling at a future that felt possible in ways Mason had stopped believing in. The year that followed was messier than any fairy tale would show. Ava struggled with her final semester, pulling all-nighters to finish papers while Mason brought her coffee and Emma drew encouraging pictures. They fought about stupid things, whose turn it was to do dishes, whether they should get a dog, how to handle Emma's increasingly complex social life. They had moments of doubt, days when the past felt too heavy and the future too uncertain. But they also had movie nights that ended with all three of them asleep on the couch, art projects that covered every surface, lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and chaos, dance parties in the kitchen, homework help that turned into physics lessons for everyone. Quiet conversations after Emma was asleep where they learned each other's fears and dreams and everything in between. Ava graduated in May, walking across the stage to accept her degree while Mason and Emma cheered embarrassingly loud from the audience. She found a job teaching art at a local elementary school, starting that fall. And when she came home after her first day, exhausted and exhilarated and covered in paint from enthusiastic second graders, she looked at Mason with shining eyes. I did it. I actually did it. You did. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. It just would have taken longer, but you would have gotten here eventually because you're stubborn and brilliant, and you don't give up on things that matter. Neither do you. She kissed him. Ask me again. Ask you what? You know what. Mason pulled back, studied her face. You're sure? I'm sure. I have my degree. I have my job. I have my independence and my sense of self and all the things I needed to prove to myself. And I still want this. Want you. Want us. Want to make it official. Emma, Mason called toward the stairs. Get down here and bring the thing. Emma appeared 30 seconds later, slightly out of breath, holding a small velvet box. Is it time? Are we doing this? I've been waiting forever. You've known for 3 days, Mason said. That's forever when you're 7. Ava was laughing and crying at the same time as Mason took the box from Emma and dropped to one knee right there in their living room. No fanfare, no elaborate setup, just the three of them, and a moment that felt exactly right. Ava Carter, you walked into my life when I'd convinced myself I was fine alone. You loved my daughter when you had no reason to. You saw through every wall I built and decided I was worth the effort anyway. You're stubborn and independent and way too good at calling me on my bullshit, and I love you more than I thought possible. He opened the box, revealing a ring they'd designed together. Emma had helped choose the stone, insisting on purple, Because Ava loves purple, and also it's the best color. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you? Will you officially become Emma's bonus mom and my actual wife and the person who has to put up with both of us forever? Yes, obviously yes. How could I say anything else when you're both looking at me like that? Mason slid the ring on her finger and Emma launched herself at both of them, creating a three-person pile on the living room floor full of laughter and happy tears and the kind of joy that comes from building something real out of broken pieces. They got married in September, a small ceremony in the backyard with close friends and family. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself and a crown of flowers Ava had made. Sarah's parents came, which Mason had worried about, but they hugged Ava and told her they were grateful Emma had someone who loved her so completely. Sarah would approve, her mother said quietly. She'd want Mason happy. She'd want Emma cared for. And I think she'd like you quite a bit. Patricia officiated because she claimed credit for the entire relationship and insisted on being involved. The vows were simple and honest, promises to show up, to be present, to love each other through mess and chaos, and everything life threw at them. When Mason kissed his bride, Emma cheered so loud that everyone laughed, and Ava broke the kiss to pull Emma into a hug that included all three of them. The reception was everything Emma had hoped for, dancing and cake and a lot of Mason's business associates looking confused by the casual backyard vibe. But Mason didn't care what they thought. He was too busy dancing with his daughter, then with his wife, then watching them dance together while he stood with Patricia at the edge of the celebration. You did good, Patricia said, both of you. Building this. We're still figuring it out. That's what marriage is, perpetual figuring it out. She clinked her glass against his. But you're happy. That's what matters. I am. I really am. That night, after the guests left and Emma was asleep, and they'd collapsed onto the couch, still in their wedding clothes, Ava turned to Mason with a soft smile. We did it. We actually did it. Having regrets already? Not even a little bit. She laced her fingers through his. I was just thinking about that night at the gala. How terrified we both were. How impossible this all seemed. I never thought I'd feel this way again. Never thought I deserved to. You deserve everything good, Mason Reed, even when you don't believe it. So do you, Ava Reed. She smiled at the name. I like the sound of that. Good, because you're stuck with it now. They sat in the quiet of their home, not his home or her home, but theirs, and Mason thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief that had nearly destroyed him, the walls he'd built to survive, the moment he'd decided to risk one uncomfortable evening and ended up finding a future he'd stopped believing in. Life hadn't given him a fairy tale. It had given him something messier and more real, a second chance that required work and honesty and the courage to keep showing up even when it was hard. A family built not on perfection, but on choosing each other every single day. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Can't sleep. Too excited. Come here, sweetheart. Mason made room on the couch. Emma wedged herself between them, and they sat there, father, daughter, and the woman who'd become both wife and bonus mom, watching the stars through the window. Is this what happy looks like? Emma asked sleepily. Mason looked at Ava, saw his own contentment reflected in her eyes. Yeah, Em, I think it is. Good. I like happy. We should do it more often. We'll do our best. Emma fell asleep between them, her breathing evening out, completely secure in the knowledge that she was loved and safe and part of something permanent. Mason carefully lifted her, and Ava followed as they carried her upstairs to bed. Standing in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep, Ava leaned against Mason's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For taking a chance on me. For letting me into your family. For believing this could work even when it seemed impossible. Thank you for showing up. For staying. For loving us even when we're a mess. Especially when you're a mess. They closed Emma's door and walked to their own room, their first night as husband and wife in a house that had transformed from a museum of grief into a home filled with life. Mason thought about Sarah's letter, about her insistence that he live fully instead of just surviving. He thought about how loving Ava didn't diminish what he'd felt for Sarah, but honored it by proving his heart was still capable of choosing joy. He thought about Emma, who'd survived the loss of her mother and come out still believing in love, still hoping for happiness, still brave enough to welcome someone new into her heart. And he thought about Ava, who'd given up so much and rebuilt herself from nothing, who'd walked into their broken family and helped make it whole again without trying to erase what came before. Life after loss wasn't about replacing what you'd had. It was about making space for what could still be. It was about carrying grief without letting it define you. It was about being brave enough to risk your heart again, even when you knew exactly how badly it could break. It was about showing up for the people who needed you and letting them show up for you in return. It was messy and imperfect and required work every single day. But it was worth it. Every moment of fear, every hard conversation, every time he'd wanted to run but chose to stay instead, all of it was worth it for this. For Emma's laughter echoing through rooms that used to feel empty. For Ava's presence turning a house into a home. For mornings waking up next to someone who knew all his broken places and loved him anyway. For the family they'd built together out of loss and hope, and the stubborn belief that second chances were possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. Mason pulled Ava close, kissed her forehead, and whispered the truth that had taken him 3 years to learn. I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy. And I'm not afraid of it anymore. Good, Ava murmured against his chest. Because we're just getting started. And standing there in the quiet of a house filled with love, Mason Reed, the man who'd spent 3 years running from everything that could hurt him, finally stopped running. He'd found his way home. Not to the past, but to a future he'd helped build with his own scarred hands and stubborn heart. A future that included grief and joy in equal measure, because that was what living fully meant. A future that proved love could bloom again, even in soil that had been scorched by loss. A future that started with one hired companion at a charity gala and grew into something neither of them could have predicted. The billionaire who'd lost everything had found it again. Not by replacing what was gone, but by making room for something new. And the woman who'd sacrificed everything had learned she deserved happiness, not despite her past, but because of how she'd survived it. Together, with a 7-year-old girl who believed in unicorn dragons and second chances, they proved that families could be built more than one way, that love could take different shapes, and that the bravest thing anyone could do after losing everything was to risk caring again. Because in the end, the only thing more painful than love was the emptiness left behind when you refused to let it in. And Mason Reed was done with emptiness. He was finally, beautifully, messily alive.